weakening your connection to the idea that, a Tesla, I'll just use that as a hot car of the moment, right? That a Tesla is going to make you happy, or all these other things are going to make you happy, and reconnecting to who you really are.
Hello and welcome to Self Talk. I'm Rachel Astarte. Today I have as my guest Kirk Nurmi. He rose to international prominence as the lead counsel for the infamous Jodi Arias. The stress of that case brought cancer into his life, and with cancer came big changes, a whole new life, a life wherein happiness is now his beacon. And with this beacon in view, Kirk has written for the New York Daily News, authored 8 books, has spoken all around the country, and in October of 2020, he debuted his one-man show, Overcoming Jodi Arias. He's appeared on Crime Stories with Nancy Grace, Court TV, Dr. Oz, The Mel Robbins Show, and The Today Show, and has also been featured in documentaries on Discovery ID and the Oxygen Network. And here he is with us today on Self Talk. Thank you, Kirk.
Rachel, great to be with you here today. I look forward to having a great and hopefully meaningful conversation.
Yes, I'm sure we will. And we spoke a little bit earlier about your being a personal assistant to your wife of 28 years and your 4-pound Chihuahua. And you educated me immediately that a 4-pound Chihuahua does indeed need a personal assistant. So I just can't even imagine what that would be like.
Well, you go find yourself a Chihuahua and you'll learn quickly. They will soon take command.
Fantastic. Because this is a show about the self and about self-growth, and you've experienced so much of it, I'd love to start at the pivotal moment for you of where your life began to shift. And of course, I would want to talk about your work in the Jodi Arias case. And I'm sure a lot of you remember that Jodi was accused of killing her ex-boyfriend, Travis Alexander, in 2008. And the case went to trial in 2013, and you were her lead counsel. So explain, if you could, a little bit about what that was like for you.
Sure. And backing up a little bit, in 2009, I was assigned her case as a public defender working in the capital unit, the death penalty unit. I opposed the death penalty and decided to take on that kind of work. That work began to wear on me, and I was going to leave that job behind, but the court ordered that I retain Ms. Arias's case. And ultimately, as you said, the trial began in 2013. And I began, without really realizing it completely, I began to lose something that I never thought I'd lose, and that was my anonymity. The trial soon became a really media sensation, right? People were streaming it on their phones. It was live streamed worldwide. It gathered in appeal. I mean, people were waiting outside the courtroom hoping to get in. It became a big, not just a media event, but really a cultural event at that time. And, back then I was a little heavier. I shaved my head, and, it just, I was no longer had the anonymity. I began to be associated with her, and everything I do kind of went through that filter. In my show, one of the things I say in my show is that, I could cure cancer, heart disease, and a few other ailments, maybe find a way to create world peace. And when I die, it would still be the Jodi Arias' former lawyer, passed away. And it wouldn't be Kirk Nurmi did all those great things. It would be Jodi Arias' former lawyer did all those great things. Yeah. And one of the things that made the trial so unique and so life-changing for me, I guess, is not just that it was a trial, because I've done plenty of trials before, and death penalty trials, they take a while. But it was about 2.5 years before the trial was finally resolved. There was a hung jury in the sentencing phase for the death penalty. The state still pursued it. And to make a long story short, so it was in April of 2015 before I was finally free from those chains of being representing Ms. Arias.
Mm.
And I decided to kind of do some of those things that I catch up on time, take some of those bucket list vacations, kind of get back to that wife of 20 something years at the time and that 4-pound Chihuahua, and spending more time relaxing, and took a few trips, and it was really great. But a few months later, I came back and I felt inflammation, a lump under my armpit.
Mm.
And long story short, that turned out to be a sign that I had stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Wow.
And this was at a time where I felt like I was fitter than I'd been in years, all this stuff. And it just really hit me hard, because I knew in so many ways, like on a worldwide stage, my name had been trashed, the public shaming, whatever you want to call it, cancel culture, all those things had happened. And then I had this diagnosis. And I think the maybe this kind of builds up to, there was this one moment where a shift really started, was that after I had learned of this diagnosis, I was out for a run. It's still hot in October, but my wife is a teacher. We get up early.
Mm.
So I'm going for a run early morning, and I know that I've got, this cancer to deal with. And I really started thinking about whether I wanted to go through chemotherapy.
Mm.
Now, I knew what that would mean. Cancer was going to take its course. But here I was in my late 40s. I had built this career. I was tied to my identity as a lawyer, and it had been completely trashed and tarnished, and my reputation had been completely trashed and tarnished. And so I began to wonder, what kind of life would I be fighting to live if I went through the chemo chair?
Right.
And so I went to kind of, I guess, what you might call a dark place. But ultimately, I decided to go in that chemo chair because I made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to live my remaining years, should I beat cancer, in the way I had my prior years.
Mm.
And that's when, defending myself, I wrote one of my books. It's called Defend Your Greatness. That's when that concept really kind of came to my mind. And then, really making happiness that beacon and making all sorts of changes in my life.
Yeah, that's incredible. So what was going through your mind? I mean, I want to back it up to prior to your cancer diagnosis. So much of, and you've lived it, right? But just listening to your experience, my heart is racing, right? You're going through this trial. Your name, as you said, is being trashed. It's associated with all of this. You've lost your anonymity. How were you dealing with your stress at that time?
Well, the cancer showing up probably tells me that I wasn't doing it very well. But it was one of those things that was all encompassing, because it was the kind of thing that, if I went out to dinner with my wife on a Friday night, I might be recognized. I mean, literally, I don't say this to boost my own star. I turn on the TV at 5 a.m. and there was clips of me at trial. I turn on the TV in the weekends. It was on the radio on my drive home. It was one of those things you couldn't escape. So it kind of became a bit of a bunker mentality, like focusing on my job. You have to do a certain particular job. There was certainly hypervigilance because we were getting threatened. My co-counsel's kids were getting threatened. I was concerned about my wife's safety. There were all kinds of things going on that just really brought up this bunker mentality with these death threats and everything else, because it wasn't just losing my anonymity. There was a degree of safety that was lost with that, because there was so much anger and vitriol against me at that point in time. And I still get it today, not as frequently, but, I still get it today as well. So yeah, it's one of those things where I just really tried to focus on the job at hand, because it wasn't the kind of thing that I had much choice about, because I was ordered by the court to do it.
Yeah. And I think that's just it. I mean, talk about the hero's journey. You refusing the call, saying, I don't want, this is not something I want, and you don't have a choice. You have to do it, and you have to make the best of the situation and go through hell, and so your connection to the cancer, is that this was, what I'm hearing is this was stress related, lowering your immune system to the extent that it made you ill. Yeah.
I believe that to be the case. I mean, it was, like I say, 3 or 4 months when the diagnosis happened. I knew in my heart, I'm a person who believes a lot in the intelligent capacities, the cognitive capacities of the heart.
Mm.
And I knew in my heart right away that this was the reason, the stress, because non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is basically healthy blood cells turning on themselves.
Mm.
So, ultimately it was that stress, right? And so getting away from that stressful lifestyle of a lawyer, what can happen to a lawyer, was really important to me when I came out of it, making those changes.
Beautiful. And let's talk about that. So what did you do? I mean, that's a radical shift. Explain how you got out of that, that cycle that you were in.
Well, sure. First thing I did, I guess, is I made the choice to stand up for myself. My client had done some interviews, made some insinuations that her defense, which was self-defense, she accused her victim of being a pedophile, all those sort of things, right? And just to refresh people's memories, and basically tying me to that strategy, if you will, which wasn't true.
Wow.
Very far from the truth. But this was while I was still representing her. I mean, this was while the verdict was being contemplated. It was really a rough time. But I decided with this cancer diagnosis that if I was going to leave this earth, I wasn't going to do so without imposing truth upon her lies. Mm-hmm. So I wrote a book about the case, and the state bar had some issues with that. I think I made an ethical response to what she said, because a client can disclose privileged information if they go talk about. I mean, she held a press conference. Right. So I went round and round with the bar, and eventually I thought, what, consistent with my promise to myself, I eventually got to the point, and it was hard because being a lawyer was so much a part of my identity. Yeah. I asked for voluntary disbarment because in my heart, using that cognitive abilities in my heart, I asked for that because I knew that the growth that I needed to undertake wasn't going to come about if I hung on to too much of the past, right? I had a new mission. I had something different to do, and I couldn't do that if I was still a lawyer, right? Right now, I'd be in an office somewhere, doing or in court doing lawyer stuff. We wouldn't be talking. I wouldn't have gone through the introspection and had the mentors I have to be who I am today. Yeah. So I knew on some level, I didn't know it all, obviously, right? But I knew I needed to cut that cord. And I did. And that was really a monumental moment when that motion had been granted, because it was time for a change. It was time for a new life, if you will.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I heard that as the first step was to take care of yourself. And it just didn't matter even losing your career to do that. In fact, that might have helped you in the long run to get better. Yeah. Yes,
because I think so often in life, we go to parties, we interact with people, one of the first questions is, what do you do, right? What do you do? And that becomes so much of who we are. It incorporates into our identity, right? And I've done some coaching for lawyers, and that was one of the reasons they hated the job, but they didn't want to lose that relationship they had with that identity. But one of the things I tell people is that whatever career you have, you existed before that career, and you're going to exist after that career. So you're not an accountant. You're not a doctor. You're not a therapist. You're Rachel, right? And you're a Rachel that's existed as a girl, as a college student, and there may be a time when you decide to change professions. So that sort of thing, we get too tied up into that. And sometimes that identity we've created for ourselves is something that we started pursuing when we were 18 or 19 and decided this particular major in school would be good, right? And we run out the clock when we get unhappy as an adult 10, 20 years later, we decide, we were just going to run out the clock because it's easier to do that. It's easier to not make those changes. Right. And I decided that I really wanted to make those changes because I wanted to really live my life and not run out the clock as a lawyer.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I love what you said about not sort of becoming the things that we do. right? That our career is not entirely who we are as people. Ideally, even is how do you bring your true self to whatever work you decide to do, which sounds like you're doing now,
Yeah, I think that's how we flourish. In my book, Defend Your Greatness, I talk about that inherent joy and value and purpose we bring into the world as a kid, and we're not concerned about, the brand of our shoes or clothes or anything else or our social status. And then all those things begin to intercede and kind of compress us down and keep us in that identity that may not be consistent with what's in our heart, right? To do something else. And look, I know we're adults. I'm not telling everybody go out there and quit your job and everything else. We got to, honor a modicum of practicality. But beyond that, we can move into happier lives when we start pursuing what's in our heart and understanding that these identities that we've created are more illusions than reality. And if we can, that makes them easier to move past when we see them as illusions or transitory aspects of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you're saying there. So for you, on your journey, taking care of yourself meant I have to write this book. I have to clear my heart. I am asked for voluntary disbarment. Then what happened? What happened? There was a lot to undo there to get yourself healthy and well again, both physically and emotionally. So what were some of the things that you did to help you clear out some of that toxicity that had been building up?
Sure. A lot. This is probably about the time a lot of spiritual growth occurred, and I connected to a lot of mentors who were really helpful. Through the magic of YouTube, I started following a guy by the name of Kyle Cease. It's pretty big in the development world, and he was an actor and a comedian, pretty prominent. Had some big specials on Comedy Central, etc. And just decided he wasn't happy and needed a whole new direction. I started following him on YouTube. Ultimately got the chance to work with him one-on-one. And then I had a great experience working with Dr. Sean Stevenson, who, if your audience isn't familiar with, should become familiar with. He's known as the 3-foot giant. He was born with a brittle bone disease, and people say, the doctor said he wasn't going to live more than 48 hours, what have you. He lived to about 40 years of age, got a PhD in clinical hypnosis, was a TED speaker, an intern in the Clinton White House, and a real transformational force that I believe this world is lacking now. But yeah, he was one of those guys, and we worked on my speaking career, but also that kind of development and my connection. And it really, for so many of us, I think, when we talk about this growth process, it's really almost, to me, an uncluttering process. It's like throwing things away, right? Like weakening your connection to that identity, weakening your connection to the idea that, a Tesla, I'll just use that as a hot car at the moment, right? That a Tesla is going to make you happy, or all these other things are going to make you happy, and reconnecting to who you really are. Mm-hmm. In that, because really, if you think about it, there is a continuum there throughout those identities, like we talked about, like you as a young girl and you as a high school girl, now you as a therapist, and whatever comes next. There's a common thread, and that common thread is what we're about. And the closer I think we connect to that, the happier we're going to become. And really, the problem, as I see it, is that we're taught that all these titles and status and cars are going to bring happiness, but they really don't, right? The happiness is going to be a byproduct. Well, I thought, why not lead with happiness and see where that takes me? And I've certainly been having a heck of a good time with some of the things you referenced in my opening there.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Help some of the listeners who might not be able to wrap their head around, what does it mean to lead with happiness?
Well, I think it means finding joy in every moment and every time, and realizing the importance of happiness, wondering why are we here if we're not happy. One of the things I did in my journey is I confronted myself with the question, are you happy?
Mm.
Now, I don't know how many people, maybe I'm the only one, but here I was in my late 40s, and I had to ask myself, are you happy?
Mm.
And that was a tough question because you just assume you're happy. Okay, I've got a house, I've got a nice car, whatever, right? And we don't confront ourselves with that question because it's easier to say yes and move on because that means no changes. But if
Right.
the answer is no, then you have to start making changes. That begins to put happiness into view. What does happiness mean to you, right? So
Right.
I wish I could give you one answer, right? But it's following what that means to you. Like it could mean painting, it could mean speaking, like it could mean all different sorts of things. What do you enjoy doing? Why aren't you spending more time doing that? What is interfering with that? What is in your heart now? Not what was in your heart 20 years ago. What's in your heart now? And working towards that beacon. And for me, it's the speaking, it's the writing, it's the TV work I do, all those sorts of things. That became my source of happiness, and that's what I follow. And it doesn't have to be some big grandiose plan. It could be, I'd like to start painting on the weekends. And who knows what that's going to lead to, right? Because you
Right.
follow those little callings, you follow that happiness, and maybe you're happier at work, or maybe you start thinking, I want to do something else. You just follow those leads of your happiness.
Mm.
So what I would advise the listeners to do is not just ask themselves, are you happy? But really confront yourself with that question, because that's going to lead to those answers that are going to put a good vision or an image of what happiness is going to be in front of you. Then you can start pursuing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were explaining this beautiful process, all that was ringing in my ears was patience. You have to have patience. So many people want happiness now. I want to be happy right now. And from a therapeutic point of view, I say, well, then be happy. You know what I mean? It's entirely up to you to do that. But there's something else to saying, find the things that give you joy, find the things that, even if you do a little bit of painting or writing or playing music or whatever you're into every day, you're building those happiness muscles, or contentment, or whatever you want to call it, So I'm going to throw a tricky question at you, but I'm sure you can handle it.
All right.
What do you think is the difference, if at all, between a happy life and a meaningful life?
Boy, I don't know that there is one, because I think we find our meaning in happiness. I think, I'm a kind of person with you that we're here on earth to learn, but we also are here on earth to do so joyfully and embrace the lessons. And I think if we follow those callings in our heart, that brings both meaning and happiness, because I think when we're happy, then we find more of our meaning, as opposed to, if, you're an accountant, your meaning isn't to just be an accountant and sit there. That's not your purpose on the planet. It's not, I don't think there's some source up there saying we need more accountants, we need this or that. You were brought here, each and every one of us was brought here for a particular purpose, and reconnecting to that brings meaning, both meaning and joy. So I think they're interconnected. And that's why I talk about that in Defend Your Greatness, because so many things are heaped on us, right? You talked about happiness. I don't know how to be happy. We weren't taught to be happy. We were almost taught to be unhappy. We were these happy kids going along, and they said, oh, you're going to have to grow up. You're going to have to get a job. You start hearing all those stuff, right? I heard this great quote the other day, and I wish I could remember who said it, but the question was, what was the stupidest thing you did as a kid? And the answer was wishing you were an adult.
Yeah,
and
right.
There's so telling, right? Such a telling question and answer, because we didn't realize as kids that adulthood would mean misery, because we didn't really know misery as a child.
Right.
Most of us. Some of us did, but yeah. I should qualify that. Yeah, a lot of us didn't know the misery, or at least the adult misery, and so we're not trained to be happy, and we find little pockets of it. And that's why I say we need to declutter. We need to throw a lot of garbage out to find our happiness and to find that joy.
That's so true. And that's part of the therapeutic process as well, is uncovering the gems of what our original and true self was, that perfect being we were when we were born. You're so right. We had to learn to be unhappy. There's so much in the world and so much joy. As a kid, you're playing with sticks and rocks and making, great, fantastic worlds out in the backyard. And we lose that. A lot of us lose that as we get older with responsibilities and things like this. So what a wonderful path. I believe you're suggesting is to find your happiness and find out how to encourage it and help it grow. Yeah.
Yes, you have to nurture it because you've been taught just the opposite. So you need to unlearn all that other crap and teach yourself how to be happy.
Beautiful. So I know you have authored 8 books. Where can we find your 8 books?
Sure. You can go on kirknurmi.com. That has a link to all my books. It has a link to my my fan page, which allows people to get inspirational messages from me or sit down for a one-on-one coaching session. I do some life coaching. And one thing I'm really excited about that I think is another way that people connect to their joy and their happiness is self-care. And I've started, now that I've been declared cancer-free, hit the 5-year mark of remit.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Hit the 5-year mark. I've started now recently on a show called Radical Body Transformation, and I've lost a lot of weight. I'm getting skinnier and stronger and feeling really connected, more connected to source energy, because I feel like the better we take care of ourselves, the more we're telling the universe that we're showing up for the reason we're here.
Right.
And we talk about all those reasons we're here. But if we check out, if we're drinking too much or smoking too much or whatever, we're almost saying, or eating too much, we're almost saying we don't want that mission. We just want to do these other things, right? But when we take the best care of ourselves, I think we're telling the universe we do. And that's what's been so fun about Radical Body Transformation. That's coming out on Amazon Prime. As a matter of fact, we're filming in Vegas next week.
Wow.
So I'm going to be doing some workouts and working with my coach. And that's been as a matter of fact, I'm hitting the gym once we're done here today, Rachel.
Nice.
So,
excellent.
But that's been kind of a really neat pattern in my life. So people can check out that too and see if that fits in something they want to do as well.
So Radical Body Transformation, and that is on your website, kirknurmi.com. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
There's a link to my coach, and you can learn about the show, and maybe you'll join me on the cast.
Yeah. Wow. Ooh. Sounds really good, actually. Yeah, that's fantastic. And of course, we're going to have all the links in the show notes so that people can find out how to reach you and find your books. And it's great that they're all under one on one website. Kirk, wow, it was a blessing having you on the show today. And I just want to thank you and wish you all the best in your amazing transformation as it continues.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much. And I really appreciate people like you that just not only the heart you bring to this, but the fact that you have a forum like this that allows people the opportunity to connect with those things. That's really great. And it's always an honor to speak to someone who takes the time to do that, to help motivate others and help lift them up. So it's truly an honor every time I'm on a show like this, and particularly yours here today, because I can tell you're a very connected and open-hearted person, and I appreciate that so much.
Well, it was a pleasure having you. Thanks again.